All right, do you want to start off with the preamble because we didn't do the study session?
Sure.
Cool. Oh, hold up.
There you go.
It's starting to move.
Good?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you're not speaking. The chat function for this meeting, public meeting, is disabled. All chats will go directly to staff. Unless you're participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you're participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, send us a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. That's it.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the May 6th edition of the MMTC monthly meeting. Our study session unfortunately had to be canceled due to inclement weather, not necessarily during the bike ride, but after the bike ride, and that would be dicey. So thanks for staying abreast of the weather conditions, and we will hopefully pick it up some other month. The next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the April meeting. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or requested revisions? All right, in that case, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the April 2024 minutes.
Second.
Okay, first by Commissioner Collette, second by Commissioner Rosette. All in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. That moves us on to public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Public comment will not be received for staff items, commission items, or calendar. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments to the commission. Is there anybody in person in the room who would like to make a general public comment? Okay, let's move to online. Chris Flowers, you are up.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. Just wanted to address something, is that when the last open house I was at, and it's not just for multimodal, it just seems to be a lot of different city departments. It seemed to be a bunch of old white people mainly. And my issue is, if you all are gonna be engaging in public comment, shouldn't you be trying to get an accurate representation of the public? I mean, if you're doing these open houses and it's just mainly old white people showing up, I don't think that's an accurate representation of the public. And also, I honestly, I think it could possibly be being done on purpose. I think city staff knows who's going to show up. And I bring this up because the last summer, the police review board, they were looking at redoing how their rules are set up. And when they did public engagement, they intentionally tried to reach out to different groups and make it as diverse as possible. And that meeting was one of the most accurate representation of what I think the city population looks like. And my thing is, the question I have, are you guys intentionally trying to get other people besides old white people to these meetings? Because if you're not, it's not doing the city any good. I mean, it's doing the old white people good to just have their voices heard, but I'm just saying the city has shown it is capable of getting a diverse crowd for public input at something, but they had to do things a little bit differently. So if we know they can do it and they're not doing it all the time, I think it means that they're picking and choosing when they want non-white people, like non-old people, like when they know when it's going to be old white people, I think. And I think sometimes they want it that way. So I just want you all to start changing how you do public engagement and trying to get more diverse voices. And also a quick thing, you all are doing that calls for traffic calming stuff in different neighborhoods. I just want to point out that you're doing it from now until July 31st, but students are gone. Like the students they're leaving this month, and some renters, their leases end in May. So and here's the thing, if you're going to be doing it every year, why can't it be longer so it's open when students and renters are in town? Like the summer months, the worst time to be doing this. I mean, why couldn't you start it back in March or April and just have a couple more months of open period for suggestions? Because doing this open, and another thing, when it comes to public engagement, we should be limiting when we do it during the summer months. So just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Any other commenters in the online room?
No one else is online.
Okay. Good. Got those down. That brings us to the regular agenda. So item 1 is consider providing a recommendation on lane configuration of the 9th Street improvements associated with the Jayhawk Watershed Middle Reach project. So our action here is to basically provide the recommendation.
Hello, my name's Nick Hoyt. I'm an engineering program manager at the MSO department. I'm project manager of the Jayhawk Watershed project, and I'm here with the design consultants for the project JEO to give you an overview of the project and hopefully provide some feedback and some recommendations on what we do with 9th Street. So first, we're going to do a project background of the whole project. There's a lot going on with this project. It's very complex besides just the 9th Street traffic implications. We'll focus on the traffic report, safety analysis, do some recommendations, and then talk about next steps where we go from here. So with the project background, there's a very old storm tunnel that goes from basically KU Memorial Stadium to the river through Old West Lawrence by the pool. It's been through modeling and other stormwater studies, it's been broken into 3 different projects. Right now, the only part of the project that is funded is the middle part of the basin, which is basically from 9th in Indiana to 8th in Tennessee, right there on the west side of the pool, going through Old West Lawrence. It's replacing that storm tunnel, moving it out from private property and into the street right away is going to be a very evasive, expensive project. So once we focused in on that is our storm project, we started looking at other infrastructure that we would fix along the way, old water main, sanitary sewers that aren't working right, and the project's grown from there. We knew that 9th Street was coming due for a street maintenance project, and last year we stopped the street maintenance project at Illinois because we knew that we would do the eastern portion of 9th Street with the stormwater project. So once we made that determination that the street maintenance is going with the stormwater project, we thought it was prudent to analyze how the street should go back configuration wise when it's done. And so with that, we got a traffic study with JEO to analyze from Illinois to Tennessee. Generally, it's planned to mill and overlay from Illinois to the west side of Vermont. So you can see here that that's the project boundaries. So it's not just there on 9th Street, it's kind of winding up through Old West Lawrence, but that gray area between Indiana and Louisiana, that's where the highest impact utility work's going to be. We were thinking, okay, so, sorry. Right now we're at like 60% plans for the infrastructure part of the project, storm sewer, water main, and sanitary sewer. We're hoping to, or our plan is to get final plans bid by the end of this year and start construction early next year. Construction's scheduled to probably last full 2 years. 9th Street would be under construction in 26, probably after the football season in 25. I guess I'll just say my big worry in this is that this discussion delays the whole project, and there's a lot of moving parts with the whole project in terms of the pool and trying to have 9th Street under construction and not the worst time of year, maximizing the summer months. So I'm really hoping that in the next couple months we can get a game plan for 9th Street and move forward. And with that, I'm going to turn the ball over to Mr. Buckley with JEO, and he's going to focus in on the results from the traffic study.
All right, thank you. Just push the down button.
Or space bar, I think.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stephen Buckley with JEO Consulting, traffic senior project engineer. Good to be here tonight on a lovely night. So I wanted to take this time to talk about what we did as far as a traffic study on 9th Street from Illinois to Tennessee. And so basically, our assignment was, we started with, will this facility work for a 3-lane section? Will it work for a road diet? Taking a look at lane configuration on 9th Street. Some of the stuff that we looked at, of course, field review. We did collect field data at both 9th and Mississippi. We also have field data at 9th and Tennessee. We didn't look specifically at 9th and Tennessee, but at 9th and Mississippi. So we do have vehicle counts, both vehicle, pedestrian, and bike counts, and those are in the report. We took a brief look at accident history, mostly relying on the information in Transportation 2050, which was based on KDOT data, and so we also looked at KDOT data and made sure that 2 of them were consistent. We did take into account the KU Gateway Development traffic impact study that was completed a few months ago, because as you'll see, as part of our level of service analysis, we did look out to 2040 like they did in that study. We also did have 2 community engagement, 2 public meetings. The first one had quite a few folks there, I think about 40 folks total. The second one we only had about 4 folks. I don't know how many people were online, but we did get some good input at those. Following the first one, there was a survey, and one of the things that came out of that survey was that people wanted to see, really the top 3 things were a road diet, and both a protected bike lane and a buffered bike lane. Those were the top 3 things that came out of that survey. And of course, coordinate with existing transportation plans like Transportation 2050. So what we started with was really, again, a high-level look. Is this even a consideration for a road diet? And really based on FHWA guidelines and city bicycle and pedestrian design guidelines and highway capacity manual, yes, it does qualify for consideration for a road diet. And the details on that are in the report. One thing about the city bike and ped design guidelines, if you follow the flow chart, it recommends, because of the ADTs, it does recommend that you analyze a key intersection. And so we chose 9th and Mississippi as our key intersection. Since it's right in the middle, it's a signalized intersection, and that's the one that we analyzed. And the headline is that at least through 2040, that intersection should operate at a level of service B. We did look at we basically looked at the existing configuration and the proposed road diet configuration at Mississippi, which of course involves a reduction in lanes on 9th Street at Mississippi. We looked at 2023, we looked at 2025, we looked at 2040. And we used the same growth factors that they used in the traffic impact study for KU, and we also, of course, used their traffic impacts for 2025, which is Phase 1 build, and 2040, which is Phase 2 build. One thing that is different about our analysis, which is more conservative, is that our base data, the counts we took, were higher than the base data from the traffic impact study. So we're starting at higher volumes based on the data we took internally. So yeah, when you look at the proposed configuration out to 2040, we do see a level of service B for 9th and Mississippi. The one point of concern is the potential for a long queue in the peak period, eastbound in the afternoon. It's called the 95th percentile queue. So really, as part of the design, we'll want to take a look at the signal timings at 9th and Mississippi. That could potentially be resolved by increasing the cycle length. So there's give and take, obviously, when you do this. So to reduce that potential queue length on 9th Street could possibly mean a longer cycle length and longer delays coming off the side streets. I don't know that for a fact, but that is, when we get into design, that could be one of our findings. But yeah, so obviously the advantage of a road diet is now we have some extra pavement to work with. So we have increased width for bike facilities, an opportunity for buffered and protected bike lanes, ped and transit improvements. And then we're also, as you'll see here in a bit, we are recommending that we do take a look at 9th Street between Tennessee and Vermont. I know that section has been studied in the past, and it works fine. And so that's why we were kind of told, okay, let's go ahead and just focus on Illinois to Tennessee. But keep in mind, now we're going to be taking this. So right now, obviously, it's a 3-lane section coming from the west to Illinois, and then it's a hodgepodge cross-section all the way to Tennessee, and then it's a 5-lane section for a little bit into downtown. So if we take this 3-lane section basically up to Tennessee, and then we have this short, widened out section before coming back down to 3 lanes downtown, I think that merits consideration if that is the right thing to do. So getting into the recommendations. So this is the existing cross-section. In general, again, the cross-section is variable between Illinois and Tennessee, but this is basically what we have, 4 lanes with bike lanes in both directions, and then parking across a couple of blocks on the north side, basically between Indiana and Ohio. So that's our existing cross-section. We did look at or present 2 different concepts at the public meeting, and so this is concept 1, which shows the bike lane along the curb, separated from parking with a 3-foot buffer. That 3-foot buffer is to accommodate door swing. And then we have our road diet, 3 lanes, and then we have a 2-foot buffer, which would be a protected buffer. That you can barely see it, but there's a little protection put in there, and then our bike lane for eastbound. So that's concept 1. Concept 2 simply flipped the bike lane and the parking. I will say that AASHTO does not, at least going back to 2012, their most recent bike guidelines, AASHTO does not recommend this one, basically putting the bike lane between the curb and the parking. And so I think that's something that we'll want to flesh out during the design phase. AASHTO makes comments about there's limited visibility with the parking But I think we can accommodate that with being judicial in our use of parking along there, because we are able to add parking stalls between Mississippi and Indiana. So anything we might lose between Indiana and Ohio, we can make up between Mississippi and Indiana. They talk about the potential of door swings, but we are putting in a 3-foot buffer to accommodate that. And really, this is where I want to hear from the bike community. You know, would you, because one of their comments is turning left from the bike lane is easier if you're outside of or if you're on the inside, I suppose. Concept 2. Turning left would be simpler, but is it safer if you're turning left from here, where you're basically you're squared up to 9th Street as you're crossing 9th Street? Anyways, those are details we can flesh out when we get to design. But I just want to, and I should add, NACTO really contradicts AASHTO in the sense that, well, I guess they don't contradict it, but NACTO recommends 30 miles an hour, greater than 6,000 ADT, which we have here. They recommend protected bike lanes. And so we could not put the bike lane, like in concept 2, we couldn't do this, have it protected, and then have parking. So, again, give and take when you're designing for multi-modes like this. And we're looking at traffic, we're looking at peds, we're looking at bikes, we're looking at buses. So it's definitely a multimodal corridor. This is the recommendation that we did present in the report. It is concept 1, and it does show the bike lane along the curb, separated from the through lane by the parking lane for westbound, and then we have the eastbound bike lane separated with the buffer, in this case a protected buffer. There are some other recommendations in the report. We do want to look at protected bike lanes, in particular on that eastbound lane. We did present a number of different alternatives to protected bike lanes at the last public meeting. That got a lot of conversation. It was a good conversation. We're looking at a hawk signal at Louisiana on the east leg. Modified protected intersections. Protected intersections are really kind of a new concept, but I think we can take advantage of some elements of protected intersections and incorporate them at Louisiana and at Mississippi. Are looking to improve the transit stops, in particular, making sure that all 4 stops along the way have a paved boarding area. Then, like I said, additional analysis at Vermont. Here's our protected bike lanes. This is our corridor from Illinois to Tennessee, and the red is basically what would be unprotected, in the sense that we have intersections, we have alleys, we have driveways, and so those areas are unprotected. And then the green is what we'd be able to protect for eastbound with some kind of device as a protected buffer. And then with westbound, we're treating the parking lane as offering some level of protection. So that's what's shown there. There's our hawk signal at 9th and Louisiana across the east leg. That gives us a mid-block active crossing between our 2 signals at Mississippi and Tennessee. Improved transit pads. And then this is what we're showing right now. This is a concept transition at Tennessee, going from 3-lane to try to match the cross-section on the east side of 9th Street. One thing I should point out here, we are carrying the bike lane through the intersection. And right now there is a very short, kind of wedged in right turn lane. And we, this concept removes that right turn lane. So I want to make sure you're aware of that as well. Is that you? Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So I actually grew up at 9th and Alabama. ridden my bike, walked up and down 9th Street, I don't even know how many hundreds of times. I've known 2 different people that were there fatalities there on 9th Street. So this, I might not have the long history of transportation engineering. I'm mainly a sewer engineer, but the safety part of this project is really exciting to me, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm really excited to move forward with it. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get your feedback and get a recommendation of what the lane reconfiguration is going to look like. Then we need to get a design contract with JEO over the summer to design that section, including from Tennessee to Vermont, and hopefully get the project under construction. Is that the end? Yes, that's the end. The other thing I want to talk about is just kind of the budgetary situation of the project. Right now, the project's only funded with, or mainly funded with general obligation bonds from the stormwater utility. Okay, so we can only do stormwater improvements with that, or, you know, if you rip out a sidewalk to build a storm sewer, you can put the sidewalk back right. You can't build new facilities with that. The water and the sanitary and the street maintenance portions of the project are all funded by their respective maintenance program CIP dollars. There's kind of just a pool each year of repairing sanitary sewer streets and water mains. So we're going to pull out of each one of those programs into the project. So similar situation with those funds, we can't build new bike or pedestrian facilities with those funds either. The street maintenance portion, you know, we had just kind of estimated about $500,000 from the street maintenance program to repave the street from Illinois to Vermont. And we generally assume that the cost of repainting it or realigning it and just painting it in any manner we decide is best is inconsequential. But, you know, the cost of repaving it's from the street maintenance program. However you paint it, you know, it can cover that. But we would need to find additional funding if we were to incorporate any of the recommended facility improvements beyond what is there. So
When you say facility improvements, do you also mean things like bump outs, bioswales, rain gardens, boxes, stuff like that?
Well, the rain gardens, we're doing some pervious pavement with the project. Those stormwater components can be funded by the stormwater project,
Okay.
right? Or the stormwater funding. The other thing you mentioned is bump outs. So we, you know, to us, we've kind of, that's pretty much putting the ramp back. You know, we're really planning on doing that as we're ripping out the whole intersection. Is it that much of a cost difference to put the ramp back here where it is, or 6 feet over where it would be a lot safer? So we were planning on doing some bump outs, especially at 8th and Tennessee, as just part of the stormwater project.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I probably interrupted you before you were.
Go for it.
So, if there's more to present, I'll get out of your way, and then we can come back later with questions, but.
No, I think we're at the end, so I don't know how this, do we do public comment on this now? All right.
It depends, honestly. I think let's start with public comment. Anybody cool with that? And then we can kind of launch into questions. Okay. Anybody in the room? I'm gonna assume no? Okay. Anybody online for public comment for this agenda item? Chris?
You're available.
Is he on? Okay.
Okay, hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I'm okay with this project. I just want to make sure I heard it right, that there were, like, I guess 2 public comment meetings, I guess, or public engagement meetings, and the second one only had 4 people attending. I think you all would have been better trying, because I'm looking at some of the data or whatever, and it was mainly just about all white people. Also, the 18 to 24-year-olds, they're a little bit underrepresented. And I bring this up because there is mention about it's going to increase congestion possibly. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at something on my computer. I believe it's the 2020 community survey. Basically what they do is the city every 4 years they do a survey, and this one it isn't people attend, it's the company I think randomly sends it out where they try to get an accurate representation of the population. I bring this up because I think the 2020 basically one of the top concerns of the citizens was congestion on streets. So if you're going to do something that increases the congestion, aren't you doing something that the people who did the 2020 community survey said they don't want? And I mean, I'm not against this project. It's kind of weird, but the people that showed up for this meeting, their concern was mainly safety. So it's just kind of weird. You have two different forms, I guess, of public comment of how they were done, and one's more accurate of the population, and that one favored, I think, like people not wanting congested streets. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not against this project though. I just wish that the public comment or the public engagement, I wish it would have been done better and got a little bit better representation of what the city of Lawrence is. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other folks online who wish to make a public comment on this agenda item? Is there anybody in the room now that we have changed the attendance? Michael, you're just in time if you wanted to make a public comment on this one. Yep.
You didn't mention that you were moving the agenda up by an hour. I just caught that.
Yeah, sorry, kind of last
Thank
minute
you.
weather change.
Yeah, I understand. Michael Allman with Sustainability Action Network. And incidentally, we did some public engagement I'll tell you about. First of all, I want to thank David Cronin for setting the stage for this project by right-sizing 9th from Illinois to Avalon. Kind of all leads right into this. Thank you. Doing similar from Illinois to Vermont Street will control rampant speeding there. This stretch shows the highest number of motor vehicle bicycle crashes in the city, including John Hermey's death in 1998. Protected bicycle lanes logically should continue from Tennessee to Vermont, which I'm glad to see it's being considered in the design. Why stop 2 blocks short of downtown? Removing the curb bulb out there at Kentucky in the southeast corner would enable protected lanes in those last 2 blocks. Our design has different lane widths than Mr. Hoyt's. We call for 10-foot motor vehicle lanes, as are the lanes on Massachusetts Street from 11th to 14th. This gives 2 more feet to add to the bicycle lane buffers as well as the door zone. Let's not skimp on bicycle protection. After all, that's the point here. We and Mr. Hoyt agree on the location of motor vehicle parking, which puts it between the protected bicycle lane and the through lanes. Though I can be convinced otherwise. Putting parking at the curb does improve visibility for turning cars and bicycles, but exposes cyclists to through traffic. Bollards would solve that just as we have called for on the south side buffer. And I should point out that a 6-foot wide street sweeper is in the CIP, which can easily sweep behind bollards. Removing on-street parking entirely would enable much wider lane protections. However, keep in mind that the majority of merchants and property owners that we did engage and get buy-in did so considering the parking would remain. So keep that in mind. We're also calling for no right turn on red, as you and Trek discussed last year in the bicycle pedestrian policy review. It's a very simple safety fix and is warranted here. And by eliminating that substandard right turn lane at Tennessee, when you turn on to Tennessee, a consistent non-zigzag lane configuration can be done from Tennessee to Vermont. Finally, clearly specify methacrylate pavement stripes as on Massachusetts streets for durability, superior durability. If
Michael,
stripes quickly wear off, much of the protection evaporates. Thank you very
Thank you for
much.
coming.
I'm glad to see this project.
Yeah. Okay. Then we got all the public comment. So let's take it back up here for questions and discussions. We're probably going to start with questions for, I guess, anybody. So there's a couple of folks to ask questions of here. Who wants to kick us off?
Okay. Hi. Do we know if this project would increase parking on 9th?
I think it is very close to a wash. There's some spots that are eliminated in the, let's see, between Louisiana and Indiana, and but then we're adding a few between Indiana and Mississippi. So I think it's within one or two of the same amount of actual spots as there is today. Right? Is that right?
I don't know, I haven't counted the spots, but it's got to be close, because we're basically adding an additional block of parking between Mississippi and Indiana, so it just kind of depends on, I can't recall what we used for the length of the stalls, but 23 feet, I think it is.
Yeah. So it's the way it's striped a little bit differently, I believe, to give more visibility at the alleys, kind of moving that parking back.
Yeah.
But then we're adding another block, so it ends very close. I guess we can get an exact count on that, but I believe it's within one or two spots.
Sorry, did you say 23 feet spots? Is that what's striped, or do we not do it the old school way of just kind of leaving a lane and, like, you figure it out?
Well,
One spot per person, basically, at 23 feet?
so I guess how it's precisely striped would be figured out in design, but
Okay.
in our study, we're showing it, like, each spot kind of squared off, marked, similar to New Hampshire Street, where there's kind of those plus signs that
Yeah.
that divide, that show where your spot starts and ends.
Okay. And I think I could even hit that kind of parking space. That's very generous. I've realized recently how bad I am at this. Yeah. Sorry.
I didn't even know that there was existing parking on 9th. And I'm wondering if JEO did a parking audit and what the rationale is for adding parking on the street. Effectively, what's happening here is just reshuffling space for cars. We're retaining painted bike lanes, the same sidewalk widths. I don't understand why the addition of parking or the rationale was. And if we did a parking audit, what were the results of it from demonstrating that parking either needs to remain on 9th and why we would add it?
So we did not do a parking audit, but there is some public engagement outside of the traffic study analysis. So we have met with all the property owners there on 9th Street, had several discussions, had meetings with them specifically. Not 100% focused on the traffic study, because it's also focused on this project's going to affect their business overall, trying to understand how they get deliveries and how their business works with our upcoming impactful project. But through that engagement, the business owners were very clear. Some of them were very clear, and some of them just agreed that they would be very opposed to losing any parking on 9th Street. I feel like the spots in front of Owens Flowers to Mama Tamales are used quite a bit. I would assume that the spots east of there are used less, but the ones by the Baptist Church, I assume, are also used on Sundays. I guess they definitely are used less during the week than the ones in front from Louisiana and Indiana. But the property owners there and the business owners there were very clear that they would oppose any reduction in parking.
And then on public engagement, there was never a question about adding parking. There was a question about if it should remain.
Right. So, but that's why we aren't, within a marginal difference, we aren't trying to add additional parking spots. We're trying to maintain the same level of parking. And I see how people might view that differently, of creating parking spots where there are not parking now. But, I mean, that wasn't the goal. The goal is to maintain the same number of parking, or maintain the current parking availability as is there now. And it shifts a little bit, but.
I mean, as you said, it's a high fatality, high injury, serious injury network. I know the individual who was hit on 9th and airlifted to Topeka. And so, I mean, for me, the design just seems inhumane, right? Like, if we are just going to keep parking or keep space for cars, reduce travel lanes, but we're not changing the configuration for safer bike facilities or sidewalks, we're just kind of maintaining the status quo.
Well, I mean, I think that the reconfiguration and going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes is going to significantly increase safety.
Yeah.
That's my general feel, and I
sure.
saw it firsthand when we did from,
Yeah.
like Mr. Ullman said, from Illinois West, that you stop with that aggressive switching lanes, trying to get around cars. I feel like right now that we took what was, you know, kind of all that lane shifting that happened on the west side, and we squished it into a smaller area as cars try and get around people just in that, you know, few blocks where there's 2 lanes before they get to downtown. So I think we have a much safer recommendation than the status quo. The maintaining parking, the goal is just to not negatively affect any businesses. And I mean, the businesses are very, I don't know, territorial about their parking spots. You know, they feel like if there's not a parking spot there, that the people will take their business elsewhere. You know, as you try and balance between the needs of the different parts of the community, it's like, how do we find a project that everyone can support? And I mean, I don't want to have a lane reconfiguration road diet project where the property owners and the business owners on that corridor adamantly oppose it. So, I mean, I don't know, there's different opinions there, but I think we have a good balance of safety and maintaining parking.
So I guess I can understand why the businesses would be opposed to basically, in effect, losing a government handout. I mean, they've been utilizing free public space for their own businesses. And yeah, it'd be great to keep that forever, right? So like, I personally have not a lot of sympathy for wanting to keep what is public space for private use. That's just me. But I also think that, as you say, you kind of got to keep the curb to curb based on how the funding works. So I don't have the creativity to think of what you could do with that additional 8 feet. Would you basically add more width to the bike lanes, the buffers, or maybe more sidewalk? It sounds like maybe all those options would be on the table. I think both Mr. Ullman and Commissioner Carter both kind of hinted at, like, that's what you probably could do with the existing, the additional space, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to a question of funding, right, for the bike ped facilities, and I know they're not coming out of the GEO bonds. Did you say that you're at 60% CDs right now?
60% design on all the utility parts of the project.
Okay. And what about the transportation components?
So the transportation components of the project and just the street maintenance, we have done this study. So I don't know, I guess I would say the study kind of gets us to maybe 15% design, where we have a good concept of what we want to do. We want to nail down that concept now, and then we really got to accelerate the transportation design to catch up with all those utility, and so we can bid the project by the end of the year.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make it clear, I don't disagree with you. I'm just not creative enough to understand what could be done with the extra lanes. So yeah,
I mean, right now there's.
Feelings on it, really.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
I mean, there's not buffered bike lanes on there, but we've talked a lot about how paint isn't protection. But I mean, I guess my other thought here is the sidewalks are terrible down 9th Street. It is an awful experience walking down 9th to any of those businesses. I went once and I was like, I'm not going back. Like, it's just really uncomfortable and unpleasant. So I don't know why there wasn't any redesign of the sidewalks considered either.
There will be a lot of ramp replacement and, moving the inlets off the radius so you can get some better ramps. I don't know where 9th Street is in the sidewalk improvement program. I don't know if that's happened there or not. I don't know off the top of my head. I guess I just say, the evolution of the project of starting with the storm project, and then it's probably $13 million storm, and then we're talking probably $4 or $5 million water and sanitary and street maintenance, and it's like, as that project evolved and gone through different studies and iterations, it's like, wow, this is really impactful. Let's make the traffic part as best we can, but we're kind of really hemmed in there in terms of time and budget to go, to the ideal, the absolute perfect, what anyone might want.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is our time to do it, though. When else are you going to have an opportunity like that?
When you did the survey, did the public see any conceptual options that did not include a parking lane? I'm only looking at 2 here that both.
No.
I think the recommended was conceptual option 1.
Right, so both concepts that were presented to the public included parking, and I think that's because, or a main reason that was presented that way is their previous engagement with the business owners.
So that was done prior to the concept designs being showed to the public? Was those conversations with business?
Yes,
and
we had met with the business owners, I believe, late last fall, and we talked about lots of different aspects. So we have met with the neighborhood there's been lots of engagement with this project dating back 3 or maybe 3 years, focused on the stormwater side. Most recently, this fall, we met with all the business owners just because the impact to their business, trying to understand their business, and, we're talking about closing 9th Street for, several months. And then through that discussion of understanding their concerns, a lot of them discussed their opposition to removing any parking.
I don't think I can come up with a definite opinion on this until I see the actual numbers on how much, where the parking is shifted. I will say I have a lot of reservations on basing the concept designs entirely on those conversations and not including public input to see a non parking lane option, because I'm questioning how much the amount of parking on 9th currently as is. I'm questioning how much that would actually impact the businesses along that corridor, a lot of which I believe the majority have their own parking lots that are separate or are attached to a residential street.
Is it fair to say that all the residential streets have parking on at least one side, in some cases both sides, that is hardly ever used for the most part?
I want to say yes, but obviously I can't.
It kind of seems like that based on my knowledge of the area, but you're actually from the area. I mean, but
Yeah, so I do believe all those state streets besides Mississippi have parking on both sides. I'd say usually there's parking available on the north side of 9th, on the south side of 9th, usually not, where there's that higher density, student population. I would also say that, like if you're parking around the corner from a business, they see that if you're telling a business your parking, subsidized street parking is now over here where it used to be right here, they're going to see that as very different. But I would also say, I think you touched on it, is what do you do with the 8 feet you gain, right? So I think in our concept discussions that we presented to the public, there wasn't I don't know, I guess we didn't have an inventive, what do you do there with the 8 feet you gain, as here's a concept 3.
So, sorry, I just want to stop you there, because I think one of the big questions I have before we even talk about what could you do with the rest of the area is how much of the stormwater that this pipe needs to carry would you say comes from the direct project area, and how much is from the much wider watershed and we have no say over? Because there's a lot of permeable pavement, so obviously some comes from it, but like, how much of a contribution is this direct project area to the flow that needs to go in the pipe? Because that will kind of influence how I approach this next step.
I don't have those exact numbers off the top of my head. I would say roughly a third of the watershed is still upstream
Yeah.
of like 9th and Indiana. So it goes up, maybe it's even more than that because it goes all the way to Jayhawk Boulevard,
Okay.
right? So I mean, that's a pretty good chunk. Jayhawk Boulevard, the whole Campanile, that drains by the football stadium. And then you have a couple blocks of city. So I would, if I were to guess somewhere, you know, I guess I would say about over half of the third of the watershed is upstream of the project area.
So I guess the reason I ask is because I guess for me there's kind of two answers, like it's insignificant or it's kind of significant. And I realize it's not going to be the entire project area, it contributes to the entire stormwater load. That doesn't make any sense, right? So reason I ask is if there were additional room freed up on this street, could there be room for some sort of swales or rain impoundment, gardens, trees? I don't know what the word is these days. Green infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Things that can soak, things that can detain, and also look good too.
Right.
As this kind of being the, I don't know, I feel like it's almost the second street of downtown Lawrence. Like, that's the important one. 9th is kind of the other important one too.
Right.
So, like to make it look good, you know?
I guess I would say yes, and we have looked at that, putting rain gardens basically in that parking lane.
Okay.
I think right now we're looking at not doing that, just because it's hard to fit that rain garden and then have a bike lane behind it, right? I mean, it kind of it makes some unique geometry there. But I guess the other thing I would say is, if we were infiltrating as much water as we physically possibly could in 9th Street, we would still have to do the whole stormwater project. Like, there's not enough room there to, like, infiltrate. I mean, we're doing permeable pavement on Louisiana and 8th Street. I don't think we're quite ready for permeable pavement on Arterial Street that gets all the traffic. I don't know. Anyone gong me before I say something?
It looks like it's on 9th is where oh, no, sorry. It's only on the state streets. I got you.
Yeah, the watershed is a significant watershed, goes all the way up to campus. So
Yeah.
this is just the middle portion. So a lot of the water's coming upstream from campus. So yeah, we're able to absorb some with permeable pavement. We're now designing our projects to meet Envision certification. So this project's maybe the first street type project to do that. So we are trying to use those concepts in the design of the project, as Nick mentioned.
Okay. Thanks.
And the only thing that I would also add that is a little different than other projects that we've brought to you, like a Walkers or Castle, where we're doing a complete rebuild, because this corridor is 6-7 blocks long, and the stormwater component's about a third of that, a couple blocks, where we're taking it down the middle of the street on 9th Street, versus the rest is kind of like a maintenance project. So there's been a CIP project, there's a resident request project that was unfunded in the CIP in 25, 26, 27 for 9th Street restriping, and that was unfunded. And so this is an attempt, kind of from the transportation side, it's more of a maintenance type project, but with the possibility of doing some more physical enhancements than just marking. So looking at physical protection, raised concrete, or what they call the armadillos or zebras or other
I like this.
other things that we're continuing to look at, not just on 9th, but on Mass Street as well, and installation costs, maintenance costs, all those things, because we're just
Yeah.
looking to do that. So
Okay.
anyway, just wanted to mention that as well.
It seems like there might be an opportunity to make things slightly easier for maintenance of the bike lane by making it 6 feet instead of 5.5. I think I saw somewhere, I don't know if it was in a public comment, that I don't know if it already exists or there's a CIP item for a 6-foot wide street sweeper or snowplow. Is this ringing a bell to anybody, or am I just making this up?
Yeah,
I
no,
feel like I saw it in a comment
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Would it be easier on MSO operations to have a slightly larger bike lane at the expense of something? I don't know. Either the travel lane widths or no parking.
So I guess I would just say, when we agree on a concept, we will have to research maintenance. We haven't really even gotten in the discussion with the operations side of MSO of how would this be maintained and what equipment would we need to buy and when. But that is definitely on the agenda as we move forward.
Remind me of the timeline for this. Obviously, it seems like, because I know the Gateway project finishes in what, 25?
So, our schedule is we're trying to advertise the project to bid before the end of the year and then award it in early January. And that gives us funding flexibility to use 24 funds and 25 funds. Then we would start by the pool and work upstream from there and not get into 9th Street till after football season's done next year. So football season, August of 25 is when phase 1 of the football stadium is supposed to open. And I mean, regardless of the new stadium or not, we don't want to have 9th Street closed during any football season. But then we would have the 9th Street, or the general plan is now to have 9th Street under construction from like maybe late 25, early 26 through most of 26, I would imagine. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So I'm struggling with it because I really like to see the numbers on like parking, because it seems like it's a big issue, especially in the survey. A lot of both positive and negative feedback for concept 1, which is this recommended proposal, was the parking, and that's kind of what like all the feedback we've seen. Is it possible to get, those numbers like next month and then we reconsider this again? Or just like seeing the change for, let's say we go with the recommended option, the number of parkings I would like.
So I have no idea how this works. Okay. I'm first MMTC meeting, but I mean, I would almost just rather sit down and try and give us 10 minutes to try and come up with that number or close to it. Because I really want to, so it's like, we got to go ahead. We got to keep the ball moving or the whole game stops. So I don't want to stop for a month.
Jason Peak with JO Consulting. So maybe trying to answer your question, there is no delineated spaces out there today. It's just a physical lane that people can pull in. So there's not a per se space count today. As we looked at that most large space, how many spaces could we get versus the space today? Are we in that same ballpark? We felt like we were, but I don't have that exact number to give you. So I guess the short answer is depending on the length of the space we give, we could come up with different numbers of spacing. We tried to take an extreme case of that length to make sure what are we doing to not negatively impacting the parking. But it's not like a significant amount of parking is being added back.
I guess that's the core of my concern with this, is we don't really know the impact of having a lane or not having a lane.
So let me ask it a different way. You have a church out there that uses parking on Sunday. You have businesses that have that parking, Owen's Flower Shop, the old Basil Leaf restaurant. Those had parking today. So kind of in the trade-off there, we're able to get another block of parking. That is parking, albeit not frequently used, is used out there. The other operation you have going on the corridor, those businesses have semi-trailers that park in those lanes for loading and unloading. So you got a number of different uses. So I'm just trying to, help me understand, either you want some parking or you don't want any parking, and that's kind of a conversation. But if you do want some parking, there's width that has to be reserved out there, and then the geometry of the bike lane and everything will adjust to that. But the core question would be, do you want parking on 9th Street or not? Because that gives freedom to do things with that. But what we heard during the engagement with the business owners is parking's critical to our business. The other thing I would add is, as we looked at your planning documents in your comp plan, This area of 9th Street is considered kind of a business district, and wanting to do things in that comp plan that are supportive of the businesses there. And so that was just another kind of input into our data about parking in front of the street as something that's necessary for the viability of those businesses. I definitely understand you as a commission may have a different viewpoint on that. Just kind of looking, I guess, more germane at the question, do you want parking on the corridor or not, regardless of the space count?
So you're saying there's no parking, formal parking on the street right now?
No, there is formal parking. There is a parking lane along 9th Street on the north side, but what I'm saying is the spaces do not have any angles kind of delineate spaces.
Right. They just pull them there.
Oftentimes when you kind of create these free-flow parking spaces, especially in a buffered condition, with that parking lane, if they're not delineated, to the driver that can appear as an auxiliary lane, especially if there's no parking in there to obstruct it. And so oftentimes you'll see you want to put some markings delineating spaces if you're going to have that, so that the drivers are on the corridor aware that's not an auxiliary lane or an extra lane to kind of drive on. So that's, as we talk about spaces, that's kind of our concept, is you would want some delineation on the parking. But, in the design, we could get to specifically saying what is the length of those bays to kind of look at that corridor.
I gotta say, I appreciate your patience with all of this traffic stuff. It's not your thing. And the scope creep of this, I'm sure, has been quite a bit. So can I just comment from a cyclist perspective, just on these two proposed concepts? I'm glad you're leaning towards this concept one, because riding in a bike lane and having to consider vehicles on both sides of you, it feels a lot less comfortable than only needing to be concerned about vehicles on one side. It also concerns me if a vehicle is pulling in and out of parking. I think, well, are they trained to look for a cyclist or not? And if they're
Probably not, yeah.
Probably not, because it's just not that common an orientation. So if this is, let's say, the only place in town where you have this, okay, there's a parking, and then there's cyclists, like, people aren't in the habit of looking for a bike, and I could see that being a potential issue. I'm glad you talked to the businesses about parking. I used to own a downtown business in another town, and parking's important, and they pay taxes, they're citizens, they're important to us, and I also am not creative enough to think what to do with 8 extra feet of space, and doing something like Greenway, that again is an additional scope creep from an initial sewer project, so.
Appreciate all those comments. The one thing I'll add to that is I didn't have a car until I was in my 20s and rode my bike all around. But I've never, I've only rode my bike in Lawrence, so I've never seen the parking as the bike lane or parking as the protection to the bike lane. But when I was in Oklahoma over spring break, I just happened to see it in Tulsa, and before that, it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, how is that going to work when the car? But then once I physically saw it there, I didn't have my bike to ride it. But once I physically saw it there, it made sense to me that this is a logical thing where, there's 3 feet between the bike and the car, and then the cars, when they're there, are making a protective barrier. But before that, I definitely had my doubts. No matter what the folks at JEO tried to tell me, I was like, are you sure this will work? But,
this is probably too in the weeds for details, but I do notice that there's a physical barrier on what is in this image, the right side bike lane and not on the left side bike lane. Is there a reason why that would have existed on one side of the road and not on the other, to kind of like physically separate the road
There's the
from
zebras.
the cycling traffic? Yeah.
So you're talking about the cross-sectional.
It looks as if there's a bump, a speed bump size.
So we are
physical
planning
divider.
I believe on the north side, there's 100 and so feet of where we could put buffer or put a protection besides the parking.
Yeah, on that one drawing, which show with the red and the green, with the green being the protected. So on the north side, what we're showing in there is the armadillo or a zebra or something similar, which would create that as a protected bike lane, with some kind of raised separation from the through lane. On the, I say north side, that's south side, sorry. On the north side with the parking, we can't have any kind of raised separation because in that buffer between the parking, I suppose you could between the bike lane and the parking, but you wouldn't.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at.
That's when you're looking at, okay. I mean, that is something to consider. We didn't include that, but those are the details we'll look at during the design. I think our thought was that the parking provides protection, and then you also, without parking, then you also have what would that be, an 11-foot buffer. If there's no one parked there, you have an 11-foot buffer between the parking lane and the buffer, so.
Maybe reading in between the lines here, but are you just worried that there are people who are just not great at parking, who are just going to go a little too far and go into the bike lane? Because that's what I would assume in Lawrence.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people learning to drive, just in general. So, yeah.
Okay.
AASHTO doesn't recommend using parking as a barrier or placing it adjacent to bicycles in their guides for developing bicycle facilities. So, I guess if it's a question of like how to use space, without a parking audit, there's no justification for adding parking or keeping on-street parking or whatever it is. I mean, if you look at the aerial views, there's like parking lot after parking lot after parking lot, but I can't substantiate without numbers, right? But if the city feels like we need to, I'll say, add parking, then we shouldn't have a bike lane next to it. Then move it all to a two-way cycle track on the other side of the street so that we aren't messing with cars during cyclists coming out or pulling into the cycling lane, and make that cycle track protected, of course.
So, I forget who kind of just commented on the similarities between the two concepts. Why weren't more concepts presented? We're kind of hemmed in on both sides, right? There's on the west, on the recently reconfigured side, there's a bike lane on each side.
Right.
It would make it. I don't know how it would work, but I believe it'd be very difficult to somehow get the bike lanes on both sides to a cycle track to one side. And then I think then you're also even with the cycle track on the one side, you're very struggling with all those driveways and cross streets and alleys on coming in also, right? And crossing through the cycle track, isn't that some? So I guess we kind of went with, you got bike lanes on the north and south side on each side of the corridor. And when you put those restraints on there, how do you get beyond just having a buffered bike lane on both sides?
Well, I mean, it needs to be protected. I agree. Current configuration, you need it both ways. But I'm just trying to figure out, if we have to keep parking, how do we get around this, right? I don't think that the two-way cycle track is necessarily the answer, given the other restrictions. But we've heard on the Mass Street that we can't do it because it's too residential, why we can't do protected bike lanes. And now we're hearing on 9th Street we can't do protected bike lanes because it's a business corridor. So and I know that's not your project.
No, trust me, I watched some discussion on it just before.
Yeah. But it's like we're always coming up against a reason why we can't do them in town. And we know that they can be done. We do them all over the country. And we navigate them. I mean, I've talked to P's and other cities that are doing parking audits because I wanted to get information about it prior to coming into this conversation. And what their process is, it's methodical, it takes a lot of time. And I don't think you have the time to do a parking audit. But I also think deferring to businesses that have an excessive amount of off-street parking already and available on-street parking in the surrounding areas isn't the answer here to consider all road users or all Lawrence residents.
Right. So, I mean, it would definitely be hard to do a parking audit and then have time to digest the information.
Yeah.
So I would, just almost everything we do, it seems like you can't do it in the summertime because what good is a parking lot when the students aren't there? So then we're doing that in the fall and then trying to turn that right around and not delay the whole project would be very tough. I guess to me, I do feel like the parking is used on a regular basis between Louisiana and Indiana. I don't think, I think my wife probably wishes I stopped there more often and bought flowers and I could tell you precisely, but I mean, people do park in front of Owens Flowers and before it was a liquor store. And then I know Brad Ziegler that owns the Basil Leaf Joe's Bakery building. I mean, I believe he told me that the parking in the back is for the apartment tenants, and he maybe has 2 spots in the back, and there's no, so that business spot relies almost completely on the street parking. So I mean, I guess if it's underutilized is an eye of the beholder. But I think taking away the parking would create a animosity with or create opposition to the project as a whole, from those business owners, and I would not want to do that, but I don't know how to solve this conversation or move it forward. I guess I'm stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think business owners that are used to parking want parking, right? Because they haven't had pedestrians coming to their businesses or cyclists coming to their businesses. They have cars flying by their businesses. I mean, I don't stop at any of these places because, even when I'm in my car, because I'm just like, oh, this is a dead strip. Like, that's my feeling. But that's my personal experience. But we know from studies that, like, when complete streets are put in, businesses benefit economically, but people are resistant to change, right? Like, it's like, oh, you take away my parking, what am I gonna do? The world will fall apart. I've seen this, I've lived other places, and so I've seen this happen, and it is, like, talking to businesses about parking, it takes a long time to get through engagement on that, which you don't have. So it's a matter of, like, what do you do? Do you defer to the businesses and, keep or put on street parking or build safer facilities?
Yeah. Well, I do feel that, like, one of the great things about this corridor is a lot of people do walk to those businesses, right? It's right there in the neighborhood where you get college students walking there and, people from Old West Lawrence. Compared to most businesses, I bet these have one of the higher percentages of pedestrian.
Yeah, I think you're right, because
but that's just my guess.
Yeah.
But I guess we go back to what do you do with the 8 feet, right? And I guess if we had a great vision what to do with the parking, it'd be one thing to sell the business owners, we're going to eliminate your parking, but you're going to get this. They're like, it feels like there's a desire to eliminate the parking just to eliminate the parking, and it's hard to sell. I feel like it would be really hard to sell that to the business owners.
Yeah, I personally would be totally behind removing it if there was a vision to coalesce behind and say, like, this is awesome. Of the visions I can sort of think of off the top of my head is at a tree-lined strip of rainwater retention. Probably not in the budget, can't be done with the time.
Well, we've looked at that specifically, and they saw it as the trees are going to block our signs and they're going to take up our parking.
Sounds like they're living in a car-dominated paradigm and don't know what it looks like, which is strange because they're like right downtown. And plenty of business. It's crazy.
What we saw it though is also with the rain retention tree boxes there. When you put the bike lane behind it though, that makes it another level of complexity to maintain.
I don't think you would do that though. I think you would replace what's currently the 5.5 foot bike lane and 3 foot buffer with that rain garden thing. Move the bike lane and the buffer to where the parking lane currently is, and then there you have it. Basically just shift that 8 feet over to the center of the road and instead do it adjacent to the sidewalk, like on the outside of the street. And then you wouldn't have to worry about, driving like a snowcat in between there or anything.
Right.
I just don't know if I don't fully understand the reasons for not being able to modify where the curbs are in the street. All I know is that it's apparently pretty insurmountable. So I don't know what to do about that, but I think that would be a pretty obvious change that could make the street a lot more pleasant for people on foot and on bike, and maybe assuage concerns of business owners that they would lose customers when in fact they would probably be transferring customers from people who live their life in their car to ones who are local and would like to bike and walk there, but it's kind of an unpleasant place to do so at this time. So, I mean, I wonder if we could kind of, say, look at all these studies that show when you have more multimodal transportation options, your businesses actually grow rather than die. But here's how we're going to make those multimodal options actually really good.
Right. So,
yeah,
I think you make a reasonable point of just, am I here trying to make a recommendation to just kind of squeeze this into the project? So I think it is an option to basically put it back as is and then figure out paint it as is or paint it with 3 lanes and then figure out like the long-term vision of the 9th Street multimodal corridor at a later date. And like, do you move both bike lanes to one side? Do you keep whatever that is? Me saying that just like scares me.
I don't want it to be punted down the road. I mean, I think Nick's right on what can be done there, is make it a much more pleasant street with the green building and like people will want to walk on it rather than it just being like dead concrete on all sides. That's my vote, at least, with protected bike lanes.
So, I mean, honestly, I have no, how does it actually work? Like what, you're like, your vote.
Oh, no, I mean, I haven't made a motion. This is a proverbial vote, not an actual vote. I'm just saying, like, I think if the question is like what to do with 8 feet, rather than dedicating it to cars, just static cars rather than moving cars, let's like make it for people who want to go down that street.
So I know this is obviously it's a delivery lane, it's a delivery street for those businesses. If the parking lane goes away, hypothetically, what would happen to those deliveries?
That's what the center turn lane is for. So if you ask businesses on Mass how they get their deliveries, if they don't have an easy alley, it's usually the center turn lane. Eagles Rest apparently gets 18-wheelers full of furniture on the regular basis, which I'm amazed that many people are buying $10,000 couches. But apparently they do require an 18-foot or an 18-wheeler sized lane, which this has basically.
So,
right?
yes.
Sort of.
Well, I mean,
or is it crowded?
What I'd say about Mass Street is like in the mornings when those deliveries are very low traffic.
Yeah.
I'd say before 10 in the morning. A lot of businesses on 6th Street get deliveries, like the used car place at 6th and Wisconsin. The semi used to just park in the center turn lane and they would unload.
Yeah.
Which that would always make me very nervous. Just seeing a person messing with the truck, like standing right just a couple feet from 40-mile-an-hour cars. I guess I would say that the delivery drivers will figure it out one way or another. I think it's better if they're on the side and not in the center turn lane.
Because my overall thought is like this is a very consequential part of town, especially as KU does their big project on that side of town, making that street much more accessible towards non-car traffic is in the better interest of the city, because people will be going to those games regardless. That's the goal of building up that entire area, that conference area, the conference center as well. It'll encourage people who are attending conferences there to then come to other parts of the city. And so we're giving a lot of way on these early conversations we had on this project with people who enjoy the status quo, which are the business owners there, and there's no shame in that. When we're not, I'm trying to consider the long-term vision of this area in general, and we're, the university is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this project. This directly impacts that, and continuing the status quo versus building that road into something that is way more publicly accessible and then also aesthetically more pleasing, but then also encourages more bike traffic through that area, just seems like the better idea. And it seems like we're kind of in a, like, pushed in, in a box right now on like what to do. And so I don't have the solution here, but I'm really hesitant to just let a parking lane through when it doesn't seem like there's a lot of public input on it. And then also, we're not really considering the long-term vision of that part of the town by just continuing with the status quo.
I guess that gets to the question of what physically and financially is allowed to be done. I think I saw somewhere in the agenda report that there are reasons that we can't change where the curbs currently are, and probably budgets, why we can't do trees or something. It would be helpful maybe to understand what those limitations are, I guess, before we push hard on something that is completely impossible, right? Because as awesome as it would be, if there's like, you cannot do this, it's not going to happen, then all right, well, so be it, right?
Well, there's not a budget for a wide streetscape project. So there's not a project in the CIP currently to do it. And there's projects in the CIP that are unfunded. We're going to struggle, hopefully not struggle, we're going after grants to do the Mass Street project. If we got to get a grant to do that project. So to add a whole new project on top to do a whole streetscape is not something that's going to happen in the 5-year CIP. We know the street needs to be mill and overlaid. If you go to, if you're able to go to slide 5 again, you can kind of see the area that we're really rebuilding the street, which is only a block and a half, like Louisiana to Mississippi. The full block is just Louisiana to Indiana. The full width of 9th Street will be reconstructed just for one block. The rest of it's mill and overlay. And we're going to look to extend looking how we have the lane configuration beyond Kentucky, from Kentucky to Vermont, even though it wasn't part of this project. So again, I point back to we're treating it kind of like a street maintenance project, and we're trying to do the enhancements for bikes and pedestrians. We're going from 4 lanes to 3. That's all. The recommendation, we're trying to be at a high level to get community buy-in to go from the 4 lanes to the 3. Nick discussed the parking. That would be a huge obstacle to overcome, I think, with the businesses. And ultimately, this is going to go to the city commission, this recommendation. So if the board wants us to look at that, we can say we're looking at it or we're not looking at it. So that feedback is still important. But I think, we saw the value early on of the parking, and just from other projects that we've worked on in the city, felt like, especially in this corridor with the businesses, the parking was an option in both. It was shown in both of the 2 different options. So I don't see us getting away from that, even if we did a parking study. And so, if just looking at the map here, the yellows, the pavement improvement area, the mill and overlay, the grays, the reconstructed street portion. And so you're really only looking at a block and a half or 2 blocks at most where if you were to do something different, it would just be in those 2 blocks with the stormwater money. And it would have to be a completely separate CIP project to do something greater, whole streetscape type project all the way to downtown, which would be great to do. It's just, it would be very expensive. Our budget is already stretched, and our CIP is already. So to add something new would be challenging.
Because I think it's important to remember kind of the evolution of the project, right? And it's a stormwater project, then we're going to fix these other utilities while we're there. And then the initial thought was, how can we restripe the street to make it a whole lot safer, right? And then that kind of led to another series of recommendations that, hey, for a couple $100,000, we can add a beacon here, we can add some protected intersections and add some protection to the bike lanes and make it even safer. But it's still kind of piggybacking on this larger utility and stormwater project, so it's hard to get to everywhere of moving the curbs, and it just starts adding zeros to certain line items.
Would bioswales, rainwater retention, green infrastructure, whatever, be counted under stormwater, though? I mean, it would affect transportation, but it is stormwater infrastructure, right?
Yes.
So what's the budget for that portion of the project? You said like 13 million, is that right?
Yes.
How much would 2 blocks worth of good stormwater, I mean like ground level stormwater infrastructure cost? Is that going to be like another $10 million, or is it more like $1 million, you know? It seems like it's pretty small compared to like the giant piping infrastructure that's going to be the bulk of the project.
Right, so that 12 to $13 million of stormwater includes water quality aspects. I think that actual estimate includes 4 tree boxes on 9th Street. I think when it push comes to shove of actually putting those in front of the businesses, they're gonna fight it. It's generally planned for this next supplemental agreement to take another look at those storm boxes, and is it in the right spot to put it in 9th Street, or is it better to put it in a side street, like adjacent to 9th Street? But then there's quite a bit of money in rebuilding Louisiana and Ohio in permeable pavement.
Yeah.
So I guess, are you saying you want us to look harder of where can we fit some rain gardens on 9th Street? Is that what?
I guess it would be good to know what the cost implication would be of if we did decide to push really hard to get rid of the parking lane. What do we put in its place? Probably something that's green, or some sort of retention or slower infiltration. And then to that effect, I mean, like, what's the cost added for that? Is it a couple zeros? Is it all the zeros?
Well, I guess I would just say, in the stormwater budget right now, we're planning 4 rain garden tree boxes. The initial concept was to put them on 9th Street.
Right.
I guess
but they might not
Jason would probably describe it as I'm waffling on that. But I would describe it as, let's go and take another look at it, and is that the right place to put them?
Yeah.
I think they're going to go somewhere. That's the plan now, to put 4 rain garden type tree boxes somewhere in the project.
So it sounds like you probably do have a line item cost for that, because you've considered 4 as a part of it. So, I mean, could you just multiply that line item as a unit cost and say, like, all right, what if we did 12, right? And, just kind of add to it.
Right. Yes, you could, and you could, eliminate permeable pavement somewhere else to make up the difference. But I guess, I don't know. What do you want? Do you have any comment on that?
Just, I guess, seeking clarity from this group, is it eliminate the parking, or, and change that to green infrastructure? Or are you saying keep the parking but look at some green infrastructure elements?
I think it's the first one. I don't think there's full unanimous consent on that. That's been sort of part of the discussion, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily, until we put it to a vote, that's what we're going for yet. What was I going to say, though? I don't remember. Sorry, it's gone. Anyway, what are you going to say?
Just the cost factor, yeah, we could take a look at that, but just really what we're trying to do with the city is get clarity on what do you want us to design, because every time we spend time figuring out a different concept, there's cost involved with that, and just wanting to make sure we're being wise stewards of what the city wants us to spend money on. The other comment is, as I understood kind of in our presentation today, is there still a kind of budget allocation for the protection on the corridor that would need to be considered to kind of be able to construct the protected bike lanes from this group? And just trying to, I guess, seek input on that, understanding the timing of the project. Is there even funding available to build those improvements? Because, if the city wants us to look at design iterations, hopefully that's leading to actual fruitful construction. But if that's not the case, then I think maybe to Nick's point, it's like, how do we set this up for success in the future until that funding decision's kind of figured out?
Could somebody remind me of where the stormwater funding is coming from? Is that already allocated in the CIP, or is it grants?
Geo bond.
Yeah, it
is.
Okay.
It's through the CIP, funded from geo bonds from the stormwater utility.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the enhancements, they're not funded right now, right? So that would most likely need to come from the bike ped program dollars for the protected bike lane enhancements and the crossing at Louisiana, the Hawk signal.
Right. But the striping would presumably come from the street maintenance budget, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I gotcha. So here's what I'm thinking right now. Oh, good. You go.
Did I see something in here about it? Like, if we did those protected bike lanes, it being like $25,000 to $100,000? Is that?
Yeah, just rough estimate.
Right.
Just depending on what we did, and I think if we did some type of curb, it would be higher. We'd have to look at stormwater then and how stormwater gets around it versus something that could be mountable, like an armadillo, what we call the armadillos, that may be a little less. So yeah, and we're kind of looking a little more about installation and maintenance options for both of those treatments.
We know that that AASHTO doesn't recommend, this configuration of parking, with the bike lanes. And so I know that, Stephen, you mentioned during your presentation but there are things that we can do to overcome those safety considerations. But I haven't heard, I guess, from this discussion what those are that would protect. I can see, in some situations having parking there, but I also see incursion from, the delivery vans and, into the bike lanes. And so I'm just curious what you meant by that and what kinds of protections would be in place that would overcome AASHTO objections.
Well, we haven't gotten to that level of detail. I will say that, of course, the AASHTO guidelines are 2012, and I'll be curious. I don't know if they're working on updated guidelines, but I think NACTO is well out ahead of AASHTO when it comes to this kind of infrastructure. And the protected intersection concept, which we introduced a month or so ago to the city in meetings offline. Basically, and this is an ACTO. It's an ACTO idea, or at least they promote it. But it does show the bike lane along the curb behind the parking, so that that there's an ACTO directly contradicting AASHTO. So I'll be curious if, when AASHTO does come out with new guidelines, is it more reflective of what NACTO is promoting? But really again it goes back to when AASHTO says they don't recommend this. Here's why. And one of the reasons is visibility of bikes. That's probably the biggest one, is that the bike lane blocking visibility of bikes. And again, that gets back to, just being judicious with the parking along there. And I will say that the assumption going into this project, our assumption going into this project, one of the considerations which are documented in the report is that parking will be maintained on the north side of 9th Street. So that was one of the assumptions that we one of our considerations, which is why both concepts included parking. But you could be more judicious with where you show parking. Right now it's just a parking lane. That's not advisable because it almost looks like a driving lane. And so when it comes to parking, you definitely want to mark it as parking spaces. And so you can be judicious where you show those and mark out the rest. Make sure you maintain visibility at the alleys, at the intersections. And so that's probably the biggest one. Another concern was the door swing, but we're showing a 3-foot buffer to accommodate the door swing. And then the other one was, and this is the one where I really want to get the feedback from the bike community. How comfortable are they in that bike lane along a travel lane, then turning left?
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah.
Is how do you get over to that inside lane to make a left-hand turn? And I didn't know if that had anything in your other recommendations talking about modified protected intersections, what you meant by that.
Well, there's a drawing in the report. It's not in the presentation, but it actually. Keep talking. Oh. Huh?
41 out of 94 of the.
This is, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so.
I guess that's
Is there any data from Kansas City on the areas like around Swope Park where they implemented the protected bike lane utilizing?
I have not looked at that, no.
parking?
I don't know. Yep. It's good to know, though. Yeah, there you go.
I think it's just on, when I'm biking down busy roads and I need to turn left, usually I'm just pulling off on, if there's, like, for instance, if I was coming up to Mississippi, I'd just turn on right on the Mississippi and then come back to get the stoplight to go through, rather than,
Yeah, I
trying
mean,
to cross
yeah.
traffic.
Yeah, box turns are
Yeah,
a
exactly.
possibility, but, I mean, not a lot of people do that, I mean, I think,
So this is the protected intersection here. We're not able to build out the entire thing because we would need, we can do it on the 9th Street side, we can't do it on the side street side because it obviously takes some of the width off of like Mississippi. But to get to your question, Pat, you can see where there's that area in blue, that kind of triangle in blue, that is where the vehicles then turn to make their left. And then they're squared up to traffic when they're looking to cross. So they can easily look left for traffic. They're visible. Another advantage to this concept is that those right turners are more squared up to the bike lane, and so they have better visibility of bikes in that crossing as well.
and the distance from parking from the intersections in all cases, how far back are we talking?
We don't have that level of detail,
I
but
mean, that would be a key component as far as I'm concerned, is the parking needs to be far enough back from the intersection that visibility is increased,
Yeah.
both for cyclists to get over and also for cars that are coming up and are going to make a right-hand turn to be able to see the
I
cyclist.
mean, you can kind of see, and we just kind of made some assumptions here, but you can kind of see what we're showing. Clearly, we're not taking parking to the intersection. But, that level of detail, we can address at design.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So just kind of trying to collect thoughts at this point. I think here's where I'm kind of sitting. As awesome as it would be to, at least personally, to get rid of the parking lane, add some green infrastructure, kind of do it right, honestly. I don't know if the current schedule, the process that we're, like the train that we're on here, is going to easily allow that. I also do think that we could probably retrofit it sometime in the future with a more full corridor study, like what's being done with Mass Street, for like a dedicated CIP project to kind of fix the whole thing. Because at this point, it's really only a couple of blocks that are being affected, but all of 9th Street kind of needs this. I don't usually shy away from piecemeal stuff, but I feel like given the constraints here, it seems like a big lift. And I mean, as much as I want to say, like, the businesses are wrong, they do want trees in front of them, the businesses are wrong, they do not need as much parking as they think they do, I'm kind of shouting into the void sometimes. So I mean, for this exact agenda item, I'm kind of thinking accept it as is for the most part. I'm okay. It's still a big improvement in my mind over what exists currently. I do think we could maybe look at narrowing the lanes a little bit to 10.5 feet or 10 to get that full 6-foot width of the bike lane to be able to snow plow it, if assuming I'm not hallucinating this remembrance of a snow plow at 6 feet wide. But it's
You did read that, that's correct.
good. All right, it's not one of those days then. Anyway, so I mean, all it would take is 6 inches from either side to get that, to be a plowable bike lane both directions, and I think that would probably help with the talks with MSO that have to happen soon, or MSO operations. So I would strongly recommend that, but I guess just going around the horn, where we kind of sit, and so I know how to make a motion here that has a good chance here.
Can I offer a historic note?
Okay, as long as it's relatively quick. Yeah.
Thank you. Michael Allman again. In 2009, the city put in the white stripe bicycle lanes. Before that, there was parking on the south side as well as the north side. We did community engagement with the merchants and property owners at that time as well. And the question was whether they would agree to remove the parking on the south side. They basically, for the most part, agreed if the parking on the north side would be kept. So now we're at that point of potentially taking away that parking also. I don't know how much they're going to dig in their heels. That's just what I mean to point out. I do like the idea of green infrastructure, and I would think maybe a configuration of a foot gutter pan, 5-foot bicycle lane, 6-foot green infrastructure and trees, 3 motor vehicle lanes, 6 feet of green infrastructure, bicycle lane, gutter pan. It would be a boulevard that might be sellable to the merchants, because, I mean, I think it would be fabulous. Maybe they would too. Just a thought.
Interesting to know about the south side bike lane. I do think there's another context piece that we're not hearing here. Oh, yeah? What you're saying?
Something really quick. Our 57-foot cross-section does not include 18 inches of gutter pan on each side.
Ah, okay. It's just implied, I guess. So the other context that this is happening in, apart from the KU construction, is that the zoning code is going to be, I guess, possibly adopted this year. And as it stands, there is no more minimum parking requirements for pretty much anything. In fact, there are maximum parking requirements. I'm talking off-street, not on-street. And there's also a significant amount of leeway now for developing residential infill. This being probably the most, I don't know, I'd say historically important part of the city. Barring any major NIMBY uprising, there's probably going to be a decent amount of development in this area, not to mention the growth at KU. So I guess just a part of me, and I hate to admit this, kind of hesitates to remove on-street parking where it may end up becoming very soon a really relevant thing. Because if we do indeed end up seeing a lot of development, which I sure hope we do, it's probably going to, perhaps tax the capacity of those State Street parkings that are currently empty for the most part, especially north of 9th Street. That may not be the case necessarily as things kind of progress over the next 5 to 10 years. So I feel like it's a lot easier to remove a parking lane and make it something else than it is to tear down green infrastructure and add a parking lane later if it's like, oh man, maybe this wasn't the best idea.
Why not put the protected bike infrastructure next to the parking lane so that the cars don't hit the cyclists pulling in?
And that I'm sure that's an option, so we consider.
Say that again.
Yeah.
Why not put the protection next to the parking so that the cars don't pull in? And
I was going to recommend,
The
I'm
buffer.
also on the side of I'd hate to torpedo this whole project by making no parking a thing. It seems like not worth it to, try to go down that road. I'd rather see this 5-block area become protected lanes. I think that's just more important than going down that fight. But also, I think having the protection where the parking happens is really important so that you don't have people parking right up against the curb because it's going to be easier to unload stuff. You see that all the time in other cities. And then also, I think, daylighting the intersections, making sure that you're not having parking too close to those intersections. I think that would be, for this project scope, really acceptable.
Yeah, I think without protection, they're just going to use the bike lane too as parking.
Right, yeah.
Pull into park there too.
There's actually a schematic on NACTA that shows it both ways, so it presumably can be done both ways. Either have planters or armadillos or something. At first, when I thought about that, I was worried that maybe there would be a trip hazard, but you usually park next to a curb, so not that different really. Should be fine. So.
Yeah, I think in my ideal world, we get rid of the bike lane or park lane, but not the bike lane.
Yeah.
The parking lane. But with the clarification on where the scope of this project. I think adding a protected barrier is kind of a necessity on the parking side. I think without having it, then you're going to see tons of drivers abuse the parking lane like they do now in other parts of town. So I think adding that barrier is kind of a must for me to ultimately support this down the line.
They're probably abusing the parking and the bike lane.
Yeah.
Because then it's a double lane.
Hitting the cyclists in the parking, in the, like.
But yeah, I think it's a really good step forward for Ninth, and I think down the line, if we can make it a broader, more in-depth project, that's kind of where I'd want to see it go. But this doesn't seem like the space for it.
I think it's kind of like how 11th to 14th on Mass paved the way for what is now going to be 14th to 23rd on Mass. Like sometimes maybe we do have to do baby steps. I mean, we live in this space at least on the first Monday of the month in terms of like multimodal, moving the dial, get people on the bikes, but that's not the reality for most people. The only other thing I would like to push, and if the rest of the commission feels otherwise, I'm not gonna go it alone, but trimming the lanes from 11 to 10 feet would be, I feel like, appropriate for 4 good reasons. One, it would be consistent with what's outside of this exact area. I think there are a couple of 10-foot lanes, travel lanes, east of this project area. The second one is it would free up room to appropriately widen the bike lanes so that maintenance vehicles could actually maintain them. The third one is that safety was by far the number one concern. What is your top value in improving travel on 9th Street between blah, blah? Safety at a whopping 26 versus everything else at 5. Safety is improved by lowering the speed of cars, always. And lowering the speed of cars can be done by trimming the width of lanes. So it seems like kind of a no-brainer here. I know there's always the pushback on trucks and garbage vehicles, but NACTO specifically says if you have buffered areas right next to the travel lanes, you should be good to go. And we do. We have the parking with that buffered area and the center turn lane and the 2 or maybe 3 foot buffer lane on the south side of the street. So it's not really much of an excuse other than maybe our drivers are uniquely not suited to pull this off, but they are on other streets. So like, this isn't unique. I just, there's no way this would be the only 10-foot lane street in the city. I feel like there's another one, but that's pretty much it. So yeah, I mean, buses, freeing up room for bike lanes, consistency with the adjacent parts, and slowing down traffic, which is clearly a concern of the people who came to these sessions. So I would just urge that. Does anybody else feel similarly, or it's okay if I'm on my own here?
I think smaller lanes is always results in safer streets, for sure.
I mean, it would really just be a recommendation by us, and that's it.
And also, another question about green pavement, or are we still talking about green pavement in the intersections and?
You mean methacrylate paint on it, or whatever paint is proposed, I guess, or is that?
Well, yeah,
details?
yeah, painted. I mean, like
green stuff.
Massachusetts Street,
We would paint the crossings to meet our policy guidance. So yeah, the side streets, I think, was identified for green paint and or the chevrons, depending on what type of crossing it would be. So
Okay.
that would be done with the project.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have to paint the lanes itself, because they're pretty
Correct.
demarcated.
We would
right?
not paint the lanes, just the
No.
crossings.
Yeah, just the crossings. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot the final thing, and I think this might be a question for you guys. So it's a minor arterial, right? What is it posted at? What's the speed limit? Is it 30, right?
30. Yeah, I believe it's 30.
Okay. So that may be problematic because the design standards for the city of Lawrence say that the minimum design speed, which I take to mean the geometry of the road should facilitate this, is 35 to 45 miles an hour for minor arterial. So I think there's a bit of a conflict in terms of what we are designing for. Do we actually want slow cars, or do we want them to go fast? It sounds like our signs say slow, our geometry says fast. So how do we decide who wins, right? I mean, if we had those narrower lanes with more stuff going on, then it would probably get you closer to a natural 30 miles an hour. But if we do keep the lanes wide, then that'll hit your design speed probably much more easy. So yeah.
We're not planning to change the speed limit. I think reducing the lanes from 3 lanes to 1 will slow the speeds down. That's going to be the main thing that slows the speeds down, because you got less, the volume, instead of in 2 lanes, it's in 1 lane. So that will be the thing that has the greatest impact on the speeds.
Right.
I've heard Dave say it many times. Everyone goes the speed of the slowest car. right? And
Yep.
that's what sets the speed.
But it's also a level of service A for the most part, right? Which means that there's not a lot of slowest cars to be behind. So generally speaking, it's a pretty wide open street. It's straight ahead. There's extremely high visibility. There's nothing really stopping anybody from going faster, except for the sense that it is safe to drive because it's a wide lane. That's why people drive fast on wide lanes, because it's easy. It'd be different if it was a really curvy road in the forest, but it is assuredly not.
So, I personally don't have, I haven't put any thought into changing the lane. Changing the lane width. I don't know if that's,
We're getting in, this is like high level. We're trying to get the kind of concept of the 3 lanes and the exact width of everything is.
I was going to say that the minimum in the city guidelines, the guidelines is 10 foot. It's a minor arterial, so 10-foot lanes, 10-foot center turn lanes. So, so you could go as low as 10. I just want to quickly speak to your comment about the design speed being 35 to 40. That's going to be a big paradigm shift in the world of especially urban street design over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because forever we've been designing to 40 and then posting it at 30.
And then being surprised when people speed.
There's a bit, I was at the safety conference a couple of weeks ago in Topeka, and there's going to be a big push toward designing to that target speed.
Yeah.
So,
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak out loud and just try and refocus us.
Sure.
So I think we're trying to get 2 things done. One is agreement on the concept. Right, which I think we're generally headed towards that, of 3-lane, road diet to 3 lanes, maintain parking on the north side.
Concept 1.
By concept 1.
Yeah.
And then if we want to do additional facilities above that, we need to allocate some 2025 bike and ped funds to the project. I think if we did that, we'd have, we can come up with some money for JO to design the streetscape, and we would come back to MMTC with the final design. If we aren't doing that and we're just painting it differently, this would probably be I assume, my understanding is this would be the end of the project at MMTC, and we would just paint it differently and not add those additional facilities. So that's kind of the 2-step process. Agree on concept 1, and then if we want to allocate funds, we would be back with a design concept where we could get in the weeds of 23 spaces versus 24 spaces and recommended lane width and whatever the recommended buffer might be.
Yep.
I mean, we can make a motion that says, just for example, we approve concept 1 only if it includes protected bike facilities, right? Something along those lines. I'm not making that motion. I just want to say, but we can. And that's what we've done in the past on some things. May I, on one last thing? I just have to put it on the record. I mean, I think my frustration here was with the public engagement. It wasn't really with the public, it was with the businesses that are along the corridor. And then, given what the businesses said, we took these 2 things with on-street parking to the public and asked them to comment on that when there wasn't support for on-street parking necessarily demonstrated through the public engagement process. I think too is and this body has heard me talk about this before, but building out a network isn't piece by piece. It isn't business by business saying, yes, I want a protected bike lane, or household by household saying yes or no. I mean, when we build a city, it's not just bit by bit, but you have to work to build out a network for it to be functional. And these are just, these are starts, and they are, these are our city creeping towards doing it and starting the beginning stages of building out an all ages and abilities bike network.
This is again a sewer engineer's comment. I feel like it's really hard to get the protected bike lanes in a truly protected bike lane in the older part of town, where you get all these cross-access concerns, where you can really build a actually separated, truly protected, is where there's been access control from the beginning of when it's been built. Because it's like wherever we do it here, there's always going to be a 30-foot gap and then a little bit of protection, and then a 20-foot gap, and then a little bit of protection on a 50-foot gap, or however the math works out. And I mean, I understand the desire to get some true protection, and I understand it's like, well, it didn't work perfect on Mass, it's not working perfect on 9th Street, and like, where is the perfect spot for
There's
it?
not a perfect.
But where I feel like it would be a lot better, where you could get a lot more protection, is where there's been access control, and there's not just this constant number of driveways, alley, street, driveway, alley, street.
Yeah, I mean, it's more comfortable to ride in old parts of cities because there's tighter grid networks. You know, there's not as much conflict as there are out in West Lawrence, for example, where there's wider roads, there's, you know, cul-de-sacs that don't take you anywhere, so on and so forth. So actually, the old city is like the best place to bike or
Right.
walk.
And I mean, when I was a kid, I'd probably ride down 8th Street more than 9th Street. I mean, I rode down 9th Street quite a bit too. But I'm just saying, to get a truly protected kind of corridor for the bikes is really hard in that old part of town where there's a lot of driveways. Maybe there's state streets without a lot of driveways where you could do that, but yeah.
Some. All right.
It's the two we're looking at right now, Mass Street and 9th Street. They both have their challenges.
All right, I'm ready to make a motion. Thank you for the great comments, questions, explanations by everybody. I really appreciate the discussion. I feel like I do understand a lot better, like what's possible, what's not, what we could maybe look at in the future, but not right now. And therefore, I would motion that we as MMTC recommend sticking with concept design 1. That is 1, right, with the parking and the, yep, okay. With concept design 1, with the additional recommendation to consider narrow travel lanes and protected bike lanes between the parking and the north side bike lane. Did I get all that?
I'll second.
Did I get?
I think you
We're
got it.
concerned. Okay.
Yep, nailed it.
I
Okay.
was just going to make sure we didn't have to specifically say that we want to allocate bike ped funds to the project. Does that need to be included right now?
2 extra armadillos.
You don't need to necessarily do that. I think just letting you know that that's where the funding will need to come from. And so when we bring back the 5-year plan, probably be in August, or I think on the calendar maybe September. We're going to try to do it in August. If we have some numbers, then we could have that decision then, and the cost. Maybe we'll have the different cost comparisons. So.
Okay. Cool.
So that's when we would know if we could put the protected infrastructure in?
You would be able to vote on, you'd be able to make a recommendation on it. Yeah.
Okay. And it'll go into the CIP?
It would go into this project. It wouldn't be a separate CIP project. It would come out of that bike ped program funds.
Okay. So I got a first and first by Kuzmyak, second by Oshman. Wait a second. Maple? Maple. That's what I thought. I don't just think so anymore. All in favor, raise your hands. It's easier to check. Okay. All not in favor, raise your hands. Okay. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1 against. 1 opposed. Okay. Are we doing good? Does anybody want to do a break, or shall we press on to agenda item 2?
Appreciate it.
Okay. Let's try to get back by 7:05 at the latest, because we do have a storm to contend with possibly, so try to keep this quick.
What it's doing here.
Oof, I'm so tired.
Thank you, Nick.
Mental energy.
Oh, are you on both computers? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Kurt, you good to go? Yep. All right, so back to agenda item number 2, consider recommending approval of revisions to the school area traffic control policy and receiving information on the 2024 to 25 adult crossing guard locations. Dustin, take it away.
Thank you. Dustin Smith, Senior Project Engineer, MSO. Need to correct my staff contacts on the memo here. Brad is Brad Harrell, Parking Manager. He's online, and then should have also included Jessica Mortinger, because we all kind of have our piece in this, and I'm sure she'll help me out as we work through it. So there are kind of 3 separate pieces to this item, and strategically ordered, because the first one may impact the last one. So the first item is revisions to our school area traffic control policy. This policy contains our warrant criteria for where we place crossing guards, and how we evaluate them, both for permanent crossing guards and accept no requests for crossing guard locations, and we evaluate those with pilot crossing guards. As we've done the pilot guards the last couple of years, we've recognized some challenges in staffing those positions, and the policy states that we would maintain those pilot guards for the full school year. And again, that's an additional burden on maintaining those positions for a whole year. And what we've found is typically there's several of those pilot locations where the guard's out there and they're crossing 0 to 2 or 3 students a day. And it's just not an effective use of a limited resource. So to address this, we're proposing to change that part of the school area traffic control policy such that the pilot guards would only be placed for 30 to 60 days, evaluated during that time period. And this is actually what we ended up doing last year, where we had several pilot guards due to the boundary revisions, and we were able to effectively evaluate those in that smaller time window of having the pilot guards, and then pull the pilots back and reallocate those resources. So I think I would like to stop there and maybe get resolution on the revision to the policy, because again, that may impact the conversation going forward.
I guess I had a quick question. So you switched from 1-year pilot period. Have you already started doing the 60 to 90-day pilot, or is that coming up for the next year?
We haven't placed any pilots.
Okay.
So from the new request that we received, like in March, I think is when we had kind of the open request for new guards, and then got to the point where we've decided which ones need to be piloted, and then those would be next school year.
Okay.
Just a second. But to clarify that, when we did the interim guard, we did the guards last year related to the boundary changes. We did this 30 to 60-day pilot period. So we recognized and we announced when we did that it was outside of the scope of the policy, which committed to a year. But recognizing we had so many pilot guard locations and limited time frame to be able to evaluate, that 30 to 60 days was what we tested last year. And that's what Dustin was saying worked when we did those guard positions.
Okay, in that case, that informs the question I thought I was going to ask in the first place, which was, did you notice any difference season to season in terms of demand? Like, were there some seasons where it's like, man, none of this stuff is warranted because maybe it's too cold? Maybe in the hot season, all these warranted.
Typically do try to count, earlier in the fall and later in the spring, if we have to count in the spring, just when the weather's better.
Okay.
And I would say that longer period to give us some flexibility in that 30 to 60 days, depending on how many locations you have and how many you need to evaluate. Also, additionally, we don't evaluate if it's a weather day, like if it's raining or sleeting or snowing, like that's not a day we're going out to count. That's not the intention. It's a typical average day. In that 30 to 60-day period, we only evaluate in the midweek. So we don't on Mondays and Fridays. If the school has early departure on Wednesdays, it's not a day that we do it. So there's a lot of conditions of when we can actually take those counts to evaluate what we actually count towards whether or not the location meets warrants.
Okay, so it sounds like your methodology is probably controlling for seasonal weather variations pretty well. So that's good. That's what I was hoping to hear. Okay. Any other questions at this stage? Okay. Guess that's all from us right now. What's the next step, I guess?
Oh, can I just, maybe you already said this, Dustin, but how do you, what's the threshold for knowing if it doesn't warrant a permanent crossing guard?
So the warrants, there's, they can vary depending on what type of intersection or crossing it is. Most uncontrolled or stop-controlled intersections are 10 students a day, and then there's a volume, vehicle volume or headway also, and then signal intersections are 30 students a day.
Okay. So if they don't have that threshold, then that's when they're not warranted. Okay.
So I guess if we're ready to move on to the second section of the item is recommending our pilot locations for the upcoming 24-25 school year. So again, we had an open call for new crossing guard locations in March. Made sure that we staggered spring break so everybody wasn't out of town when that was open. And had several requests, and had to filter some duplicates, and we do have criteria in the policy where if a location has been evaluated the last 5 years, we would not reevaluate it until after 5 years. So some of those were requests that had recently not met warrants when they were evaluated. So we ended up with our list of 11 that we're proposing to pilot next year. I think this is by far the most that we've ever done. So again, kind of shrinking that evaluation window will help with the staffing for this. And then there was one location that was requested that had been evaluated just last year, so would not be evaluated for a pilot this year. And our next item, the last piece, is the recommendation for a permanent crossing guards for next school year. So the majority of these are existing guard locations. Actually, all of them on this list are existing guard locations. The top section of 9 current guards recommending to maintain, because they met the warrants the last time they were evaluated. The next 3 were reevaluated this year as part of that 5-year periodic reevaluation. They all met the warrants and would be recommended to be maintained. And then the last one, 7th and Locust, was reevaluated this year and did not meet the warrant criteria, so it would be recommended to remove this one. And then I did have an error or an omission of a location that we, I guess this falls in the pilot guards, a location that we intended to evaluate this year, and I didn't get it in the table, but it would be an additional pilot guard at 27th and Mayfair, which is by Sunflower and Southwest Middle. It's the uncontrolled crossing on 27th Street, where it has a refuge island and a marked crosswalk, but currently does not have a guard. But just there's been traffic pattern changes there with the reconfiguration at 27th and Wakarusa, and then also we had a guard in place just down the street that kept an eye on this one, and so we counted it, and it was one of the busier crossings in town. And so we were going to additionally recommend a pilot for that one.
Looks great. I think my only question, and I'm all about putting more crossing guards out there, 27th Street in Louisiana and 27th Terrace in Louisiana are like right next to each other, but both obviously met the threshold for needing permanent guards, even though they're really pretty close.
Yep. I've always thought the same thing, but they continue to meet the warrants because I think students are coming and going.
Yeah.
Slightly different.
There's some history at that location also. That location changed, I can't tell you which specific crossing was added, but after the policy was revised for the school area traffic control policy the last time, we added middle schools to eligibility to have crossing guards where they used to not. It used to only be elementary schools, based on feedback we heard in the Safe Routes to School process. And after that chance, that was an opportunity where we evaluated existing crossings that were already happening, and it met the warrants for both of those locations to have crossings.
Okay.
And I guess we did intentionally evaluate those locations this year because of, the elementary school closed. But just based on middle school students or potentially elementary students that are still using them, it still meets the warrants.
Is the total number of adult crossing guards going to go up? And I guess, are there continued challenges in staffing all those positions?
The permanent guards would be reduced by one.
Okay.
With removing the 7th and Locust. But then, again, we have a large number of pilot locations to evaluate during the year.
Okay.
So this is Brad Harrell, parking manager, and I also oversee kind of operations for staffing. I will say that our challenges with crossing guards remains, and trying to staff those positions is going to continue to be a challenge. But this timeline gives us a little bit more time to push it out there and hopefully get more applicants.
Okay. I think I heard something similar that like hiring bus drivers is difficult just because the hours are so odd. It's very difficult to find people who are free at that time.
These are similar. Typically, these are split shifts where you work in the morning and then the afternoon.
I realize that collaboration with USD 497 has been difficult, which is why Brad's department has to fund all this. But there's, is there any opportunity to like try to target hire, support staff or maybe more limited teaching staff from schools who are already going to be, kind of around at that time anyway, but maybe don't necessarily work first and final period? I don't know how many periods schools have here, 7? I don't know, like gym teachers or cafeteria staff, like are there
Classified staff, probably.
Yeah, like is there any targeted hiring that could be done in close collaboration with USD 497 to fill these otherwise really odd times and get more guards? Because it seems like the feedback I've heard from the public has generally been like, man, there needs to be guards everywhere, right? Which obviously is not feasible, but I don't know. Maybe the school district would have a better insight into who could fill these positions. Because it sounds like it's not really even the funding that's the problem necessarily. It's just finding people with this odd schedule. But that's not necessarily our jurisdiction here, so just offering ideas.
I mean, I think that's something we can continue to ask. They do help us in recruitment when we are ready to post and hire these. When Brad has openings online, we ask them to repost on social media. You probably saw a lot of that last year in our conversation, primarily because this decision wasn't happening for a lot later in the school year, so it put us in a crunch. So we're hoping to have a little more time, and Brad will continue to work on other strategies to attract and retain is another part of that. So employees.
I'm glad you guys are meeting these challenges head on and trying to surmount them. It's not easy, but it's a very valued service, it sounds like. Any other comments or questions before we do a motion? It seems like we're probably going to do a motion to recommend, but before we get there. No? Okay. Who wants to do it?
I'll do it. I move that we recommend approval of revisions to the school area traffic control policy.
Point of information.
Did you guys
do public comment?
Oh, jeez.
Oh, whoops.
This is what happens when we have decision fatigue, huh? Thank you. Is there any public comment? Not in the room, unless somebody's hiding behind that column. Is there any public comment online for this agenda item?
Not at the moment.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And who the heck voted me chair? Jeez.
Okay, now I'll move that we recommend approval of revisions to the school area traffic control policy.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first by Commissioner Khaled, second by Commissioner Carter. All in favor, raise your hands. It's unanimous. Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
And Dustin and everybody, yeah. All right, that moves us on to staff items, where we have two ones. First is the Mass Street Improvement Study. There he is.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Aaron Parker. I'm a senior project engineer, and I'm working on the Mass Street Multimodal Improvements Study and Project. And I'm back to give you a status update on where we're at with the project, and then let you know what the next steps are moving forward with MMTC and with the project as a whole. So we met on April 9th with City Commission and received contingent approval for the study pending staff return to discuss a few design details. And those are enumerated in the executive summary for this item. I'll just note from that the funding status is we are submitting for a TA grant. We are accepted to submit for the TA grant and putting together final touches on the concept study. And those will include Multimodal Commission and City Commission comments, including that we're to come back to discuss some design details and get those approved. Some of the design options that we've come up with include things that we've talked about with the commissions, but also a cycle track, which was not discussed previously as one of the potential options for the corridor. So since it wasn't discussed with the open houses in detail with plan and profile views, we're going to go back to the public with kind of a similar status update, but also with plan and profile views and takeoffs for quantities and cost estimates to construct each of the options. And with that, by then we may have some of the operations and maintenance costs to discuss, just so the public is aware that there's some trade-offs with the options. And that'll be on May 22nd at the same location, Liberty Memorial Central Middle School in the library. It'll be more a presentation style format. Some of the O&M costs we're looking into include curb maintenance and plowing and sweeping. And I am in discussions with other municipalities as Commission requested to see, especially Midwest communities where they get snow, and see what they do with their protected bike lanes when they also serve waste pickup and they have physically buffered bike lanes. And so I'm compiling some of those comments, and next steps are that I'll come back to Multimodal Commission in 1 month, June 3rd, and discuss findings and any public comment from the May 22nd open more presentation.
Okay. Cool.
And look for a recommendation.
Thank you.
Any comments from the commission? All right. Cool. Thanks, Aaron.
Welcome. Thank you.
The other staff item is NTMP.
Yeah, so we've had quite a bit happening with the neighborhood traffic management program the last week or so. We got our website updated. All of our new policy and process documents are up for the public to see. And then we got a press release out last week with the new, or call for new projects for the traffic calming to be included with the program this year, or at least start the engagement and kind of evaluation project identification process. Also wanted to mention, I guess, that call for projects will be open until the end of July. So hopefully giving neighborhood associations time to hold a meeting and discuss if they need to. We've already received somewhere around 30 at least inquiries. Some, have submitted the statement of interest, statement of support forms already. We're going to be busy working through all that. And then I also wanted to mention, forgot to put it in the item, is that we have restocked the yard signs that had a pretty high demand a couple years ago when we distributed those. So we have those available at the community building for the public to walk in and pick up. Don't have to send an email or ask for one, you can just walk in and they have them ready for you. Cool.
The website looks great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
the flow chart looks great.
We got a general public comment that was technically about staff items, and that's not normally how we do it, but just out of curiosity, the timing of the like the request solicitations. Any comment on that? The general sentiment was that the timing is perceived to be poor due to moving out of students, I think, is what I gathered. I just want to give you a chance to respond. I don't have any opinion one way or the other.
no, I mean, this has been in progress for a while, and we got it out as soon as we could. I guess we had a couple weeks to hit students while they're in town, but we weren't trying to avoid students, but we also understand students typically aren't very engaged.
This is true.
But
Yeah.
there's still opportunity, and it's all online, so they don't necessarily need to be in town to fill it out.
That's true. Okay.
So the community building, what else happens there? I'm only been here a couple of years, but so the signs are there, so now I want to go get a sign. What else goes on at the?
They have a gym and like a fitness room.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
All right.
Do like dance
Downtown-
classes for kids?
Yeah.
Lots of classes, yeah.
Downtown basketball.
Check it out. Okay. That was it.
All right. I think that's it for staff. Any other comments on that, or? Then sounds good. All right, on to commission items. We got climate action plan. Any updates? Where's that at?
Let's see. They're going to be at the Lawrence Commission meeting to update the city commission on May 14th. They're supposed to have their final draft on the county website. I was just taking a peek. It doesn't look like it's quite up yet, but they're going to, publish that on the website before the 15th or the 14th meeting. And then on the 22nd, they'll be presenting the final draft to county commission to consider adoption at that time. So, final stretch for that team.
Cool. Sounds good. Land Development Code Steering Committee, not a lot of updates. We've still been having meetings, but it's more to just hash out kind of larger questions. I think we're going to expect the sort of combined redraft of all the modules soon. I want to say by the end of May. I think they're looking to get it to the city commission or planning commission by June, so tight timeline. We'll see what happens, but yep, still pushing forward. Vision Zero?
Yeah, we had our first kickoff meeting with the consultant Olson Engineering on April 2nd. Had a really good showing from all of the committee members. We were supposed to meet last Thursday for our second meeting. I think the consultant was going to report back on crash data for Baldwin City and Eudora, but there was a delay on some of the data. So maybe I don't know the details of that, but we're rescheduling that meeting. So yeah, it's moving forward. It's really exciting.
Cool. Did you end up filling out the roster of the steering committee? Because it's still listed with a lot of holes in it, so. Do you have a chamber and a LAN and a Haskell and a United Way?
Yeah, we'll get that updated.
Okay.
Some of them, not all of them, but more than what's on there.
That's what I figured.
Based on what I just heard you say.
And hopefully somebody from FHWA.
There is some.
Yes,
That makes sense.
yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll be excited to see that one keep going. Last is bricks.
It's not here, but I'm happy to give you an update if you'd like one.
Yeah, sure.
The steering committee first met in March, and then since in April 4th, we had an open house and a values discussion with an online survey that was available through the 19th on that values survey, and that will be shared with the subcommittee tomorrow at their second meeting, where we're going to hopefully hone in on some direction to take the policy. But we got a lot of good feedback, of course, on both ends of the spectrum, but there's some top values that really came across for both brick streets and sidewalks separately that will allow us, I think, to identify kind of where our priorities should be. So.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be very interested to see which direction this goes, because I can see it going either way, right? Like, like accessibility, or do you want aesthetics and like, can you do both, right?
Yeah, and just spoiler alert, if you go look at the Brick Street and Sidewalk Committee page, the summary, the public comment summary is posted. So you can go take a look at that if you'd like. It's linked from the agenda.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay. Cool. Be interesting. All right, MMTC calendar. So I guess the first thing is probably to talk about what's going to happen on June 3rd for the study session. Shall we reschedule the bike ride? I feel like it would make sense to have that before the bike facility discussion. I guess that's probably a question for Stephen, because he's the one hosting it, but otherwise I would vote for just scooching it to June.
I'd love that.
We're fine with that.
All right.
Yeah, that'd be
Sweet.
great.
Yeah.
Plan on doing that.
Easy enough. Other than Mass Street, is there any? Oh, yeah, sorry.
You're good. I was just worried about Brick Street and sidewalk policy, but that's for July study session.
Ah.
So we're good.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, maybe let's move bicycle facility discussion to August, because that's totally blank right now. Unless there's anything else that anybody has a burning desire to get in there.
No,
Bike parking. That was supposed to go somewhere. I forget where that was. We talked about it.
I think bicycle facility counts both of those.
Perfect.
At least we'll probably have time for it.
That's great.
Parking, and also like how do we approach lanes anymore, so. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing that we're looking at moving is probably moving up that 5-year bike ped non-motorized projects from September to August.
Yeah.
And not sure, another, I guess, quick update is the city commission is considering the board realignment structure tomorrow night on the agenda. And I think the transition plan for that would happen by August 31st, so beginning in September could conceivably be the new Connected City Board. So that the recommendations to merge MMTC and PTAC is Connected City. So
I assume it would take some time to like redraft the bylaws and like re-sign people to stuff, but maybe.
yeah, that if it, I think in the transition plan, just from reading the memo that's on the agenda tomorrow night, would happen from June through the end of August. So you'd have 3 months for anyone to apply for the board, and and it looks like the majority of them are 7 members. So that's
cool.
I think they're trying to, not just align them with the strategic plan, but also just the way that the number of members and the procedures and all that is also being considered. So
that makes sense.
So anyway, yeah, we're looking to move that up to August, that 5-year plan, and then that's all I got for the calendar.
Okay. Sounds good. Any final thoughts? Motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
All right, I'll second it. I think we're all unanimous, right? All right. Thanks, everybody, for a effective and engaging and timely meeting.
Hope we get home before the end of the storm.
Not bad. Oh, it'll be fine.
Look like me.